Hello, my name is Alison and I'm the founder of HoneyBadgerRadio. This video is entitled The Switcheroo, How to Understand What Feminists Are Actually Saying. I hope you enjoy this content. This is the first installment in a new series in which I take work from prominent media outlets and remove the jargon, euphemisms, and misleading terms and replace them with phrases that clearly state what they actually mean. In this installment, I'm going to cover NBC's Think op-ed by Noah Bertlatsky, entitled, This Father's Day, Men Are Experiencing a Crisis of Masculinity. The solution? More feminism! First of all, I'll be replacing the word man itself. To explain why, I'll first point out that the word man is not a label for a biological male adult, it's an achievement biological male adults acquire by pursuing a set of actions. Thus, phrases like be a man and real man make sense. Men are not men by virtue of their biology, but by virtue of pursuing the commonly agreed upon actions that constitute manhood. In our society, those actions that constitute manhood, in other words, those actions that make one a good man, as opposed to a flawed or a bad man, is protection and provision of others. In particular, protection and provision of women, and those vulnerable creatures women advocate for, such as children, animals, and minorities. I will be replacing the word man with a reference to an action, to those actions that men are expected to take by a majority of our society in order to be real men and good men.
For those of you who might be skeptical, I'll use another example, that of the word fireman. There may be firemen who start fires. There may be firemen who are incompetent at putting out fires. Firemen who get drunk at their post and miss the alarm, even firemen who take advantage of people suffering from smoke inhalation to rob them. But those firemen are failed firemen. Firemen are defined by the action they're expected to take, namely, putting out fires. Likewise, there may be many men who rape, who abuse, who are drunkards, or any other number of unsavory things, but those men are considered failed men. Men are defined by the actions they are expected to take, namely, saving women.
Positive manhood is simply saving women. Thus, men are women savers, and for clarity's sake, will be labeled as such. Feminism will also be replaced with a phrase based on its most salient and obvious actions. Feminism's salient action is reducing women down to victims of everything in existence and making men responsible for that victimhood. If you contest the observation that feminism reduces women down to victims, I invite you to review feminist literature in which academic and media feminism has reduced women down to victims of our attitudes towards plants, recycling, medical experiments done on men, the difference in treatment between male and female patients informed by medical experiments done on women, mathematics, physics, roads, seatbelts, debate club, professionalism, air conditioning, manspreading, mansplaining, manterrupting, into emotional labor in relationships, freedom of speech, the scientific method, language as a proxy for thoughts, male norms, and women are also victims of homophobia, prison rape of men, having a life partner die, culturally determined speech patterns, online dating fraud, history, changing rooms, identity theft, old women, air pollution, smartphone abuse, and much, much more. Some of these items may appear to be non-gendered to the layperson, but feminists will assure you that women are the primary victims of all of them. And if women are the victims of these things, then there has to be a perpetrator group, a group ultimately responsible, either for doing it or for not saving women from it. Using patriarchy fallacy, and I'm not calling it patriarchy conjecture because feminist patriarchy fallacy isn't just unproven, it's been proven false. Using patriarchy fallacy, feminists make men responsible for saving women, while delegitimizing any quid pro quo, even the expectation that men have the right to limit their women-saving activities to women they are in intimate relationships with. That means men can ask for nothing in response to their women saving, nor can they ask for it to be restricted. Feminists do this by saying men are responsible for women needing to be saved in the first place. And they savage anyone who dares to question either the reduction of women down to victims or the responsibility of men for making women victims, thus their absolute obligation to save them. Therefore, if we replace feminism with its most salient action, feminism reduces women down to victims, while minimizing men's victimhood and emphasizing their unrestricted obligation to save women. Dropping the misleading feminism and focusing on feminism's salient action, we get women-saving advocate for feminist and more obligations to save women for feminism. Likewise, traditionalism in all its various forms becomes old obligations to save women, and masculinity becomes ability to save women. Also, any reference to a man who is seen as not able to help or is actively harming women becomes a woman herder. A dangerous man is a woman herder. So let's do the title first. This Father's Day, men are experiencing a crisis of masculinity. The solution, more feminism. That's the original, and the original becomes, this Father's Day, woman savers are experiencing a crisis of being able to save women. The solution, more obligations to save women. Now, before I continue, I'd like to ask you a question I always ask. If you're listening to me now and you enjoy this content and you think we at Honey Badger Radio can make a real difference in the world, I'd like you to ask yourself why you don't currently support us if you don't. If you do, then just ask yourself why you do. And please send the answers to topic@badgerpod.com. And if you're interested in supporting, there will be links at the end of this video. We're also doing our fundraiser to get us the ICMI. So that will also be at the end of this video. The last time I asked you to think about supporting Honey Badger Radio, I told you all that if you would prefer to support someone else, support Canadian Association for Equality's 2018 National Conference, which was June 9th of this year. At the time I asked you to support the conference, it was about to be cancelled for lack of ticket sales. You, the viewers of Honey Badger Radio, managed to turn that around. And the conference was a smashing success. So once again, I'm calling on the power of your generosity to help another men's issues convention. Please go to the International Conference on Men's Issues website and show your support by purchasing a ticket or making a donation. They have 50 adorable tickets left that need to be adopted by a loving men's issues enthusiast. Link to purchase ICMI tickets is in the low bar. Now to recap. Man is woman saver, masculinity is ability to save women, feminism is more obligations to save women, traditionalism is old obligations to save women, and any man seen as useless or dangerous to women is a woman herder, or any variation of woman herder. Now back to the article.
We are experiencing a crisis in our ability to save women. That's the claim of Canadian psychologist and self-help author Jordan Saverson. Saverson argues that more obligations to save women and policies like no-fault divorce have destabilized old ways of saving women. As a fix for this, Saverson recommends a variety of things, including enforced monogamy, a solution that implies women savers are oppressed due to a lack of consensual sex. This is really dishonest. Enforced monogamy is the one solution that they're going to bring up of Peterson's, if it is a solution at all and it isn't him being quoted out of context or completely misrepresented. If it is one solution, it is just one solution, and it's the only one they're going to bring up or focus on or give any time to, because it's the one they can discredit most easily. Saverson's claims have been broadly criticized, but he does have his defenders as well. These often argue that the crisis in our ability to save women has been caused by new obligations to save women, which has led to evolving norms generating confusion and mixed signals. New obligations to save women have set women savers adrift. They are no longer sure they can be women savers, and as a result they are struggling economically and psychologically. This weekend is Father's Day, a holiday typically celebrated with the displays of the ability to save women from older threats. It's as good a time as any to acknowledge that there is indeed a crisis in our ability to save women. But it isn't caused by new obligations to save women and changing how we save women. Rather, women savers experience violence and oppression because old ways of saving women are not changing. And it is, in general, powerful women savers who enforce these unhelpful and sometimes dangerous woman-saving expectations, not tyrannical advocates of new obligations to save women. As one example, consider male suicide rates. Women savers are the victims of 3/4 of suicide in the United States. This isn't because advocates of new obligations to save women have successfully carried out a campaign to keep women savers from having sex. Rather, male suicide rates are tragically high because of an adherence to old ways of saving women that are no longer required by modern society. Our culture tells women savers that they are supposed to be emotionally and physically strong and self-contained in order to be women savers. It is not surprising, therefore, that women savers are less likely to seek medical help for mental health problems. As Ali Fogg writes in The Guardian, we tell young women savers not to cry, then wonder about male suicide. Encouraging young women savers not to cry is dangerous. Encouraging young women savers to love guns is even more so. Guns are an old way of saving women from threats. Lisa Gold, a psychiatry professor at Georgetown, told Quartz, connecting the ability to save women with gun ownership exacts a brutal toll. Older ways of saving women contribute to another crisis: imprisonment. Mass incarceration disproportionately affects Black people and people of color, but also, and relatedly, affects women savers. Women savers still make up close to 93% of prisoners. This is not just because women savers commit more crime. A 2012 study found that women savers receive much longer sentences than women for the same crimes. It's true that white advocates of new obligations to save women have at times weaponized stereotypes about old ways of saving women and the violence of women herders. Saving women advocate Frances E. Willard advanced her crusade against liquid woman herding by suggesting that white women in the South were threatened by drunk, dark-faced mobs, an argument that implicitly justified women saving by white women savers. Hillary Clinton infamously referred to some criminals as superwoman herders, a racist dog whistle. But the penal system is not run by advocates of new obligations to save women. Instead, it's run by politicians, who too often seek to bolster their own ability to save women through tough-on-crime rhetoric. When Trump calls Mexicans women herders, he's demonstrating his own ability to save women by calling out and denouncing supposedly woman herders. In this way, supposed woman herders are ground up in the prison industrial complex in order to fuel the egos and the political careers of women savers. The crisis in our ability to save women, Save Her Son's fans talk about, is deliberately vague. The real crisis in being able to save women, though, is much more quantifiable. There were close to 45,000 suicides in the U.S. in 2016. There were approximately 38,000 gun deaths. There were around 2.3 million people in prison. Women savers bore the brunt of all of these problems, and yet the solid, demonstrable problems facing women savers are rarely discussed. While the fictional crisis of women savers oppressed by a lack of sex has obsessed punitively serious pundits.
You mean the media invented this ridiculous obsession and ascribed it to its ideological opponents in order to discredit them?
Part of the reason why this happens is that the women savers most harmed by the old obligations to save women are Black, brown, poor, and mentally ill, and so are easier to ignore or erase.
While Black, brown, poor, and mentally ill women savers were most unable to fulfill the old expectations of women saving, they're even less able to fulfill the new expectations.
And part of the reason is that a narrative about women and advocates of women saving oppressing women savers seems dramatic and counterintuitive. A narrative about powerful women savers oppressing less powerful women savers is less exciting and requires more self-reflection. For Father's Day, though, we should focus on actual challenges facing women savers rather than imaginary ones. We're not in a zero-sum battle of the sexes in which gains for women's equality erode women savers' security. Indeed, women savers need more obligations to save women in their lives and a relaxation of the old obligations to save women. In other words, new obligations to save women isn't killing women savers. Old obligations to save women are. And they will continue to do so until both women and women savers are fully equal and fully free.
I'm going to take a few segments and do another switcheroo now. Instead of men or women savers, I'm going to use nurses. And instead of feminism or more obligations to save women, I'm going to use unpaid additional nursing duties. Instead of masculinity, I'm going to use patient care. Let's begin.
We are experiencing a crisis in patient care. That's the claim of Canadian psychologist and self-help author Jane Peterson. Peterson argues that new unpaid duties and policies like non-negotiable one-way contracts with hospitals have destabilized nurses' ability to function. As a fix for this, Peterson recommends a variety of things, including reducing patient numbers and pay increases, a solution that implies nurses are oppressed due to a lack of control over the duties they are expected to assume without additional compensation. Peterson's claims have been broadly criticized, but she does have her defenders as well. These often argue that the crisis in patient care has been caused by unpaid additional nursing duties, which has led to evolving nursing norms, generating exhaustion and inability to cope. Nurses are no longer sure they can fulfill all nursing duties. As a result, they are struggling economically and psychologically. But this isn't caused by new nursing duties. Rather, nurses experience exhaustion and inability to cope because old expectations of nursing are not changing. And it is, in general, higher-ranking nurses who enforce those old expectations, not tyrannical patients and new nursing duties advocates. For Nurses' Day, though, we should focus on actual challenges facing nurses, rather than imaginary ones. We're not in a zero-sum battle of patient versus nurse, in which gains for patients' right erode nurses' security. Indeed, nurses need new obligations to save patients and their lives and a relaxation of the old nursing expectations. In other words, new obligations to save patients isn't overworking nurses. Old expectations enforced by senior nurses are, and they will continue to do so until patients and nurses are fully equal and fully free.
Do you see the ridiculousness, the ludicrousness of all this yet? Why should nurses get a living wage when they can do even more work for less? After all, nurses are obligated to the needs of their patients. Therefore, they should do their work for free. Why shouldn't women savers be expected to do more work to save women for even less recognition, less encouragement, less opportunities for social approval, for sexual intimacy, or even any kind of intimacy? They should be doing even more for less. Women savers aren't owed any of those things. Women saving is their obligation. After all, they're somehow both responsible for saving women and putting women in the position to need to be saved at the same time. And they should expect nothing for it. These are the new rules of women saving. Instead of pairing up and saving a specific woman, women savers now should support government initiatives to save women from the various new victimhoods identified by feminism. When I replace man with woman saver and woman saver with nurse, the crisis becomes clear. We're expecting more from nurses and we're not giving them anything in return. In fact, we're using the fact that nurses are obligated to care for patients as a moral bludgeon to force nurses into worse and worse working situations for less pay and even less gratitude. Of course, there's one big difference. We don't have a narrative that makes nurses responsible for patients being in the hospital in the first place. With that one shift in thinking, we can create a social milieu in which nurses have to accept any kind of treatment from patients and from hospital administration, any kind of expectations, any kind of depredation or loss of income, because they're only making right what they made wrong in the first place. That's a narrative of subjugation, and that's what we're directing at men. How much of that narrative has impacted your thinking? Did this exercise in switching out euphemistic and manipulative terms for simpler phrasing help make your thinking around this issue clearer? Was this exercise helpful to you? Please tell me your answers in the comments below. And thank you for listening. So, did you ask yourself why you didn't support? Well, if the answer is to why I don't support is I think I will support, you can support the whole team by going to www.patreon.com/HoneyBadgerRadio and pledging on a per episode basis for however many episodes you like. For monthly and one-time options, go to www.feedthebadger.com. In addition, we're currently doing a fundraiser to support our bid to get to the International Conference on Men's Issues in Britain. Link to support the Badgers getting to the ICMI in Britain here. Yes, I got the right hand this time, so it's right. No, went too far there. Our current goal is to get myself, Karen, and my husband Jonathan to the convention. Karen will be the keynote speaker, and I will also be speaking on the topic of how compassion for men changed history. Jonathan will be helping out with logistics, including driving and camera work. I'll be giving another update shortly on what's going to be happening at the ICMI and how you can help us out to make that event even better. But first, let's get there. Go to www.feedthebadger.com and select The Badgers Take Britain, Take 2 option. Every little bit helps. $5, $10, $20. I'm going to get kicked off of YouTube for that one. Anyway, go there and put some moolah in the kitty. Thank you.